Now that we know how to create calculations, how to create parameters, in this session, I really wanted to look at some kind of practical examples where the calculations and parameters really become helpful, right? I want to look at some kind of examples where the data issues, right? If some issue comes up with the data, how can this calculations and parameterization help me resolve those kind of issues? Or if I want to extend my data to create something more, how can I use these formulas and parameters? And primarily, if the user experience has to be improved, the analysis, the visualizations more and more improved, I can still use the calculations and the parameters. And I could also look at a lot of flexibility, especially if I have to do some kind of data blending. Right, a very good example, especially if I have to get the data from some other field where the joining condition is not exact between the two. So some such kind of activities, or probably I can even look at if some ad hoc calculations are required, how can I really look at doing all these things? Right? Some kind of an examples really become more and more handy for us to work out. So let's look at the data issues to start with, right? So for explaining all this or demonstrating all this, I wanted to use one simple Excel sheet containing 6 records. So we are talking about the renters of an apartment, apartment 1 to 6. These are the people who have rented the apartments. Start date, end date, area, and the price. So very simple data. Right now I want to take this data into Tableau. Right, so let me open a fresh sheet. So let me close this application altogether. So we are connecting to a fresh data source, which is an Excel file, which I call it as rental data, a very simple Excel file, right? So there is something to do with the discount in the sheet where, okay, for these different people, these are the kinds of discounts that are offered. We'll talk about it later. But the rental data is a very simple stuff, right? So let me take out the discount. So the rental data, if I am simply looking at, these are the apartment, renters, start, end, area, price. In our Excel sheet, this is the renters' names and the discounts that are applied. So these two have come out as two different datas out here. Now, if I see this, okay, this is the start date is somewhat in this kind of a format, something dot year, whereas end date is in this format. You go to the data to understand some nuances with this. The start date is shown with ABC, which means the start date actually is not a date. Tableau is not able to recognize the start date as a date in this. Right? I have pulled it from Excel. Even in Excel, if you see, it's not a date, it's actually a text. Right? And whereas this is recognized as a date, but this is showing first of that particular month. So though the end is being considered as a date, the start is definitely not considered as a date. The start is being looked at as a text. Okay. Then apartment, it is being shown as a measure, whereas apartment is just a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has shown it as a number, but probably I may want to have it as a dimension itself because it's just one value or one sequence that you have given to an apartment. So probably I can very well change this from measure to a dimension. So now the apartment is out here, right? I have the end date, I have the render, I have the start date, etc. out here. Now, which means our data is not fully clean. There are some amount of problems which I need to correct before I do any kind of analysis on the data, right? So like the start date is incorrectly formatted, so I may want to correct it, or in some cases some specific field will have both numeric and textual data. I may want to separate them. So all these kinds of cleaning of the data by thinking of a particular algorithm, I can use a particular formula to really correct this data and get it in the right format, right? So like the data that we got in Excel, the start date was something bad, and let's say even when it comes to the end date, so what I want is start date, I want to correct it, and the end date, just for the sake of understanding it, instead of pointing to the first of the month, I want to point it to the last of the month, right? Right now in our Tableau, when we have looked at the data, the end date was pointing to the first of the month, right? DDMMYYYY. Whereas here it is pointing to the last of the month, right? Now, I really want some kind of correction over that specific value, right? Now, just to test it out, the start, let's say you drop it on the rows. It's not showing anything. It's actually it's not picking it as a date. It just is displaying the numbers as it is. Whereas the same thing, if you drop the end, you are getting the year. So you can, from here also you can make out that year is recognized as a date, but start is not recognized as a date. And now, how do I really convert, or how do I really use these formulas to really convert both of them into the valid date fields, so that all that date related stuff of Tableau can very well be used for coming out with very exceptional analysis. So that is what is our step. So we'll start with the start date, right? Now, the start date, the first thing, let's say I want to change it, change the data type of this. Simply, if I want to look at, I want to change the data type of this, let's say from string to date. Now, okay, it has become a date, fine, but look at the data, it is showing null, which means directly it could not get converted into a date. So Tableau was not able to recognize the date when it is in the current format. So I can't directly convert it into a date. So this option is not working at all for me. So I'll go back. I'll take the string as it is because the option is not working for me. So now I'll create one new field which Tableau can really, I'll convert this format into some format which Tableau can understand. Let's say instead of dots, I'll put slashes so that Tableau can understand that. So how do I do that? I create a calculated field, right? Let me call it as std date, which is st date, which is talking about the start date, or let me put full name start date. Now I need to replace, let me do a step by step. I want to replace what? The string, substring, replacement. What is the string I want to replace? The start. The start is the value that I want to replace. In that, what is that I want to replace? The dot. The dot is the substring that I want to replace with what? This. So my start date will become something like this. So whatever the field which is the start, it will first look for the dot, and on the dot, wherever it is finding the dot, it will replace it with a hash slash. But remember, this is a text related function, so it does not become a date by itself. So I have to really do the typecasting, and if I have to do the typecasting, especially the text, if it has to be converted into a date, I can't just change the data type of it, right? Especially for calculated fields, I can't simply change the data types, which means on the top of that formula, I have to write something like a date, so that the whole text formula will get formatted as a date, right? So what I can simply do is, on the top of this, I'll use a formula called date, right? I'll use this formula called date. So basically it's like this. I'm starting with the formula called date, within which I'm using replace, where I have used the start, where I'm looking out for the string called dot, replacing it with a string called slash. Now when I'm applying it, now I see there is a start date that got created, and you look at the data source, the start date got in a much better Tableau understandable kind of a manner, right? 19/1/4/1. So we are getting the date 19/1/11/8/4/5/5/5 kind of stuff. So this is a Tableau understandable start date, right? Now if we try to understand that formula, whatever we have written, we had two, one inside the other, right? First we have replaced dot with a slash, so directly the formula will become, so 05/05/2014, and that is something which is understood by Tableau as a date. But of course, because replace is a function which is associated with a text function, I want to convert that string value to a date, and the date as a formula is simply doing a typecast from a string to a valid date. And here I can't change the data type directly for a calculated field. I have to use that casting formula itself. Now Tableau has treated it as a date, and all the options now which are associated with the date, they are very much available. Now the another way, the same thing, if I really want to see, let me create one more tabulated calculated field, the start date 2, because here I am trying to introduce you to another formula which is called as a date parsing. I want to give a format, right, and it gets parsed as a date. Now what is the format that I have for my start date? DD. Let me give a format for my, so I'll give the format saying DD, whatever the string that I have, format it, look at it in this kind of a format, DD dot mm dot YYYY. So this is the format in which our data was there. What is the data? The start. So what we are saying is, whatever the data that we are getting, it is like in this kind of a format. So the first two, take it as date, the next after the dot, the next two take it as month, and after that take it as year. Now you could see the example out here. Converts a string to a date in the specified format, right? So you could very well give this kind of a format, and when I say apply, you could see that here the date is getting converted even in this kind of a format. The start date is getting converted in this kind of a format. So we can very well play different kinds of ways in which I can convert the date. Alright. Then similarly, if I am going with end date, Now I am saying the end date is representing okay, but I don't want the first day of the month. I want the last day of the month. Now the better way is probably I want to add 1 month, which will give me the first day of the next month, and I'll subtract 1 day, which will give me the last day of the current month. So these are the two things I'll do on the end date. So for that again I am doing a calculated field, right? I am creating a calculated field called end date. Now I want to do an addition of the dates. Okay, I am doing a date addition. The date part. Okay, first I want to add 1 month. So that's where I say month has to be added. Interval. How many months? 1 month. To what date? To the end date. So this will do the addition of 1 month to my end date. Now on the top of this, I want to add, now this will become my date. Right, 1 month is added, this will become my date. Now again I'll do a date add. Wherein I am looking at so in this date add, what is that I am looking at? I want to subtract 1 day. So I'll say day. Because I want to subtract a day, it's like adding minus 1 day to this particular date that got created. So this is the updated formula. Okay, I don't want date here, I want a date add. So this is the formula that we have created, and when I say apply, now I get a new saying, okay, now this is 31st October 2014, 31st March 2014, so 31st July 2014. So I am getting the last day of the month accordingly. So now this is my start date, this is my end date. Right? I am just doing, I am thinking through the logic. First add 1 month, subtract 1 day, that will give me the last day of the month. So I have got the start date, the end date. Now I have these two date related fields which can be used in whatever mechanism I want. Right? So I can very well use it now for any kind of calculation purposes, which means we were able to use some of the calculations for actually fixing some kind of errors that are there with our actual data that we have imported into Tableau. So I am not correcting anything at the source level. From the source, whatever is coming at my Tableau level, by using some kind of calculations and formulas, we are able to bring out some kind of modifications so that we can use the data much better for our enhanced visualization mechanisms. Right? Now let us see how we can use these calculations for extending the data. See, many a times there could be a few dimensions or measures that I really want to have it as a part of my data, but they are not present as a part of the source. Now this is what we are calling as extension. Of course, in our earlier sessions we have covered a few formulas which we created for an extension purpose. Right, just in this example itself, I have a start date and an end date. I don't have the number of days, which I want it as a difference between the start date and the end date. Right, so which is what will be telling me the number of days, which means I want to do a calculation so that probably if required I can take it as a part of my Gantt chart plotting as well. Now those kind of stuff we can very well create additional fields. So I can very well come to the data and I say create a calculated field and I say number of days, wherein I am just finding the difference of the two dates So in terms of what? The date part. So let's say I want to find the difference in terms of days. The start date. Now what is that start date? Start date is my start date, and then end date. So I'll have to specify the end date. So if I give this as the input, I apply it, I get a new field called number of days. And in the data, if you see, okay, I got it 179 days, 71 days, etc., etc. Right? So I got it. Now what I can simply do, if required, I can take it as a part of my calculation, visualization, everything. Right? So probably if I want, I'll take the renter here. So it's giving me the names of each of the guys. And corresponding to each of these people, I'll take, let's say, the start date. So I'm getting a start date. So it is showing me the year kind of representation. And let's say if I'm putting the length, if I have to get my Gantt chart, the whatever is the number of days, I'm putting it as a part of the size. So when I'm putting it as a part of the size, okay, I'm getting, okay, here I should not have the year. I should have it, otherwise it turns it into a heat map. So instead of the year, I'll take the exact date. Now automatically this gets converted into a Gantt chart, and the length of it is actually telling me, or the size of the bar is being coming out through the number of days itself. So I have created an additional field because based on the data that is present, used it as a part of the visualization. That is what is one more important purpose of the calculations, right? Now let me see how I can still more enhance the experience of the users, probably in terms of visualization. Now let's say here I want to bring in some dynamicness, right? Especially some kind of a what if kind of analysis or some kind of dynamicness, right? I want to give some start date and end date, right? So probably just to start, let's say I want to give only a start date and I want to compute 1 month period from that start date. I want to see from this particular start date, within that 1 month period, who are all the people who have joined, who have got into that apartment, who have rented the apartment, who are all the people who have rented the apartment within that 1 month period. So once I change the start date, I want to make start date as a variable and that too as a global variable. So if someone changes the start date, automatically all my formulas, everything should change, and even the identification of those people who have joined during that 1 month period, probably which I can represent through some kind of colors, even that needs to change. So I will give that kind of a flexibility as a part of my dashboard, that you enter any arbitrary date, and once you have entered a specific date, from that date, let's say 1 month, right? You can even customize that as well. Let's go step by step. From that date 1 month, I want to see who are all the people who have joined during that specific period. So let's take that kind of an example. So probably let's proceed with the same Gantt chart. So I will create one parameter to start with. So I could create one parameter, right? I'm creating a new parameter. Let's call this as date selection kind of a name. I want it as a date selection parameter. The data type for it should be date, right? The data type for it, I am taking it as a date. The current value, let me set it to some period associated with this. So let me say 05/01, right? Let me give it as so let me say 05/01/2014, right? So I say the display format is automatic and allow all the ranges. Fine. Now I have created some parameter here called as date selection. Right? Let me pull it up. So the date selection is the name of parameter that I have created, and probably all I can say is show the parameter control. So there is a date selection parameter control that I had created out here. Now based on this, I want to create one formula which is the end date, right? Need not be this end date, selection end date. So I have to create a new calculated field. Now this time I call it as selection end date, right? I have created a calculation field called selection end date. Now I am simply adding, let's say, 1 month to it. So I say date add. So let me call it in terms of months because I want to add 1 month. So let me take it in terms of month, and I want to add 1 month. And what is that field that we have created? Date selection. So this is the date field parameter that we have selected, which means even that can be used as a part of the formula. Now when I apply it, I get a selection end date. From the date selection, I am getting the selection end date. Now, okay, now I got a new field called the selection end date. And what I can do now, this I will pull to the level of detail. Once I have pulled it, the selection end date came into the detail, and I am setting it not here, I am setting it to the exact date. So the selection end date is set to the exact date. Now which means I will use this as a part of my graph. Right? Now all I can do is I'll simply add a reference line. Instead of a line, I'll take a band. From some point to some other point, I'll create a band. Now that I have a selection end date here, date selection here, I can very well visualize the stuff from here. The band for the entire table, right? I'll create a band for the entire table, and the value is the date selection, which is a parameter, to the selection end date, which is a value. And now I can do the formatting of that to my requirement. Right, let's say I want to put some kind of an yellow color to it. Now this is showing me a band from 5th January to 1 month. So this is the area. Now I could still change the date. Let's say if I am putting 1st of April, suddenly my date is changing. So which means my graph is updated accordingly. Right, now that I have pulled and I have created a band, so what it is showing is corresponding to this, the band is typically getting updated. Right, now if I show May 1st, I could see my band getting updated here. Now the same logic, probably instead of, I can create one more parameter, number of days. Right, let's see how we can improve it. Now I am creating one more parameter. Instead of saying 1 month just by hard coded, I'll say number of days, right, which should be, let's say, an integer. So the current value, let me take something, no issues. Okay. So I got a new parameter called number of days. Even I'll say show the control. So even the number of days have to be shown as a control out here. Now I'll go to this selection end date and I will try to edit this formula. So instead of month here, where I hard coded it as 1, I'll change the formula now. I'll convert this into a day, and instead of 1, I will return this number days. So I'll take this number days so that this date creates dynamically. Now I say apply. Now you see this is the band is showing only for 1 day. But if I say 50 days, now the band is expanded. Now if I put 2 months later, now that 50 days from this particular period. Now that is what is the dynamicness that we are bringing in. Now if I really want to see a different color based on in what cases the start date lies within this. So which means I have to create one more new dimension field. So I create a calculated field saying false in between. Right, I want to really check whether the value actually falls in between the 2 dates. So that's where I am checking whether the start date is greater than or equal to whatever is my date selection parameter. So it should lie between the date selection parameter and the selection end date. So that is what we are saying, start date greater than the date selection, and I am also trying to check out if the same start date is less than or equal to the selection end date. So selection end date. I am simply looking at if this is true or false. So it is going to give me only a value true or false. So what I can do, this false in between, I can simply drag it onto the color. And what I could now see is, so this is something which is falling in between the 2 dates. Now if I change the dates just to play around with the system, I select 1st April, it shows me that these are the 3 dates which are falling within that range. And now if I am changing that to 30, it is showing that none of them are falling. So we are bringing in some kind of dynamicness to the entire calculation. So we are allowing the user to change the date, number of days, to see between what period did a person join the apartment in a particular period or not. So we are giving it as a band, and we are able to highlight the things by displaying the band accordingly. So that's a simple way where we can use both the parameters as well as the formulas, where we can really leverage the advantage of the formulas and the parameters to make the visualization more and more appropriate. Alright. Now we'll try to achieve another kind of example where we can use our calculations and parameters. Right, let's see here the data sources. We had 2. One is the rental data, the other one is a simple discount. Right, if I look at the discount, it is showing me all these things, the renter, the discount. These are the 2 fields that this discount is showing, whereas in the rental data I am able to see all these fields. Right, now let's say I want to combine. So the discount data, if I look at the spreadsheet, the discount data is showing 5%, 2%, 1% discount for these three renters, Bush, McEnroe and Mihalik. But here if you see, Bush is the last name, McEnroe is the last name and Mihalik is the last name. So I can't join them directly here, right? So even if I try to do some kind of a join between the two, I cannot get into the joining, right? So even if I say by default, okay, rental data and discount I'm adding, and even if I say it's a left join, even if I say it's a left join, and it is based on the renter as a field in both the cases. But still what you could see, when I am getting the data from the secondary, the renter values are coming null, the discount values are also coming null because the names are not matching. Here it's a full name, here it's only the last name. But unless I really want, see here my objective is to compute post discount what is the rent that is associated with both of them for all the people. But I know that these are the last names. So my original data has a full name, my discount data has only the last name. So what is that I can do? So this is where again I can do some kind of a cleanup of my work, wherein the first thing that I can look at is in my main data, which is the rental data sheet, I will create one additional field which only contains the last name, correct? So what I can do, I can create a calculated field. So I'll call it, let's say, renter last name, so that I can match. And now how do I create that renter last name? Either I can use a write formula which talks about the string and the number of characters. Okay, let me look at what is the string. I want the renter. So that is the within that string, I really want some number of characters. But that some number of characters, it has to be how many? Anything after the space. So out of the total length, I can find out the length, right? Length of that renter, I can very well find out, right? But I don't want the length of the renter. I want it as length of the renter minus the location of the space. What is the location of the space? I am trying to use a formula called find. Within that renter, I am trying to find out the location for space right at the beginning. So this is the kind of length I really want to find. Now just trying out, let's say I apply it and look at the data. What is that I could see? Renter is this one. The renter last name now is coming out as AG Bush, right? These are the renter last names. So I am able to get the renter last names by using the formula. That is something which we got through a calculated field. Now all I can do is I can join the stuff. Now I can edit this join from the data source. Instead of using the renter, right, now I can really edit the relationship. Now that I have the renter last name, oh, now these are from the same location. They are not from two different. Otherwise, we could have done the blending based on the renter last name. If they are two different Excel files, we could have done that. Now, once I have created this renter last name, I can very well use it for any of my computations, right? Now the matching and everything, because now at the data source layer, Now at the data source layer, I have the renter last name. Right from the original, I have the renter last name, and from the discount, now all I need to do is map the renter last name with the fields from the discount. So all I should try is so now that we have this, now let's say with this I create a new sheet where I get, okay, let's try out the renter. I get the renter name from rental data. So I get the renter name, and let's say from that I also get the renter last name. So this is the renter last name, and corresponding to this renter last name, let's say I want to get the price, right? Whatever is the rent. So that rent amount I'll get it from the price here. So for each of the renters, now I'm getting the price. And let's say I also want to get the discount that is applicable to each of the renters, right, along with the price. Now it is showing me the null. I want the discount. Okay, let's say I want the discount for each of them. Right now it is showing null because these two are not mapped. Let me do one thing. We can use the blend actually. We'll do two different data sources. Let me save this one single file. Right, let me do it as move or copy here. Right, let me create a new workbook altogether. Right, let me create a new workbook altogether. And let me call this new workbook just to demonstrate this. Let me create a new workbook called discount. So I come here. So within my Tableau, I create one more Excel file called discount. Right. So now that I have created that, what I'll do is I'll come here, I'll add a new data source which is an Excel data source which contains discount. Okay, now let's try linking these two. Now anyhow here we have brought in the last names. Now they are linked through the renter. You could see here the moment I have brought in, they are linked through the renter. But I don't want them to be linked through the renter because in that case I'll get my null only. Right? If these two are linked through renter, I'm going to get my null values only. So rather than that, okay, I'll pull off the stuff. Right now I'll get the name of the renter. Fine. So these are the renters. I'll get the last name, but of course this time as a part of the relationship I'll link between the renter last name and the renter from the other file. So I'll do an edit relationship where we are talking about rental data and the discount. So it's not a renter to renter relationship, right? I can't take the renter to renter relationship here. So that's where I'm removing it. I'm adding a new relation, right? For that I need my mapping. Okay, there is a discount data as well. So we go towards doing a definition of the relationship. In that custom relationship, we are bringing in the renter last name with the name of the renter. Why is this one not coming? So it is trying to build the relationship between renter and renter. So first let me take out this renter, then let me define the relationship here, a custom relationship. I want between the renter last name and the renter. Okay. I want the relationship between the renter last name and the renter. So this is what is the relationship that got built. So I can very well link on this relationship. Now the simple logic that goes, I go to this rental data. Let's say I get the renter name from here. I get the name of the renters. Let's say I get the last name of the renter. Now let me try if I can get the discount associated with each one of them. Yes. Now we have got the discount that is associated with each one of them, a 5%, a 1% and a 2% out here. So we are able to identify what is the discounts each of them are getting. Now the next thing is, let's say I want to compute what is the price to each one of them post discount. So let's say for that I want to do some kind of a calculation. So again we are doing a calculated field, probably called as actual price or price after discount, rent after discount, right? I am saying the rent after discount, which simply goes as whatever is my price, right? Let's say I'm doing it here. I'm not getting my price out here. So I have to do it. I have to see from where I'm actually doing it. So I'm doing it from the discount table. No, I'll do it from here. I'll do it from here. Go for a calculated field, right? Rent after discount. Now here I have the field called price. So I'll say price multiplied by 1 minus of whatever is the discount. So I get to this discount and I say discount. Price multiplied by the discount, the name, right? If I'm simply saying discount like this, there are some errors. Now when I'm saying price multiplied by 1 minus discount, let's see what is coming out, right? You look at the value, what is getting displayed. We have created a field called rent after discount. Let's try pulling that field to really understand what is the calculation. Really it is not doing anything. So that is not the way that I have to do the calculation for rent after discount. So I'll edit this formula. Now one thing is, whenever I am pulling a value from a secondary source, I have to get it as an aggregated stuff. So what I do, summation of the discount as a name of, right? I'm looking at the discount as the name of I want to get it from here. So we have two discounts, right? I want to get the discount, let's say from here, which actually shows as discount dot discount. So from the discount source, we are trying to compute, right, from the discount source. Okay, let me simply put it like this. Price multiplied by 1 minus of, I'm doing a summation where I'm getting the discount from this secondary source, from the secondary source called discount. So I'll get something like this, right? Or probably if you just say you want to get the discount, you just point to this. You get it as some discount, right? Discount dot discount. So some such kind of thing is going to come out. Now it is still containing some kind of errors, because now if you look at what is the error, expecting a closing parenthesis for the expression starting at character 9. So from here there is one closing parenthesis that is expected. So let's close it. Still it is containing errors. This time it is saying cannot mix aggregate and non-aggregate arguments within this function. So this part is an aggregate, whereas this part is a row level. This is an aggregated level, this is a row level. It is saying it can't mix both of them. So the best way is bring even this into a aggregate, right? You try to express the price also as an aggregate. Now it says the function is valid. Now you say apply. Now what is it? Okay, there, now you look at the values. Right now it is coming out as the measure names, etc. Now what is happening? Let me edit the rent after discount again. I'm getting it as sum of, okay, so once I say okay to it, I'm getting some error out here. Let me do one thing. Let me take out the discount from here. Let me not have the discount out here at all. So I have these here. I don't want to take the discount from here. So let me look at the part again. Let me pull out everything else, right, just to make sure that we are not making any kind of mistakes. I am initiating the process again. Alright, so this is the plain one. So now I am trying to pull in, now these two are connected, so I am getting the renter last name, or we'll get the renter name first of all. Then we are getting the renter last name, fine. And now I have to get, for this corresponding renter, from the discount sheet, I am trying to find out what is the discount that is applicable. So up to here things are fine. And now I want to really do a calculation associated with the rent after discount. So I'll try to pull the rent after discount. Yes, it's showing me the rent after discount is 1900 here, right? If I look at even the original price, probably if I add even the original price here, it is showing these are the prices and these are the rents after discount. So the calculation went on right. It's only because of our representation it became a problem. But what I really wanted was even the value should come even for these as well. Now this is where I can go to edit my rent after discount and simply, okay, this formula, when there was no value, it was actually returning null. But now I want to return it as 0. So whichever formula is returning null, and if I don't want to return null or if I want it to return 0, I have a function that I can write on the top of it, which is a zn function. The zn function I can enclose on the top of this, which will actually give me a value of 0 when the null occurs, which in the sense my calculation got updated, and that is what is giving me a better way of looking at the data. So my calculated field is really helping me out in terms of the displays in this particular format. We have to be very careful while pulling the data from different sources, because earlier when we were using the discount from the other sheet, the whole thing resulted in a kind of error. So we have to be slightly careful when we are working around. The blending of the data becomes more and more easier when we are doing some kind of calculated values, so that we can match the numbers even if they are not exactly matched between the two tables. That is what is an example which I thought we should look at, which can give us a fair amount of an idea in terms of how the data blends can really, how the calculations and parameters can really help us in coming out with much better visualizations of the data. All right. So thanks a lot for listening to this session. Thank you very much.